Find a solution. Well, joining me to talk about this, Mick Fealty, who is the editor of Slugger O'Toole. Mick, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
How positive are you feeling about these talks that have got underway today? There have been several rounds since January 2017, all of them ending in failure.
I think we're right to be confident that these talks will be successful. The two main blocking parties, on one hand, DUP lost 5% of its vote in that last election, but the one who put the boycott in place over an Irish Language Act was Sinn Féin, and it lost 7 percentage points in its vote. And I think what we have known in the past is that when there are these blocks, it really comes down to the voters to inflict some serious pain on those who are doing the blocking. For the last 3 years, Sinn Féin has got away fairly lightly with that, but I think in this election, the voters passed judgment. And I think the fact that Julian can say that health is now the issue and not the Irish Language Act, I think only sharpens the dilemma faced by the local parties. And it's also encouraging that he says that there are now going to be all-party talks. Since the St Andrews Agreement in 2006, the British government of all colours have favoured the DUP and Sinn Féin, and talking to them alone and excluding the other three parties. I think the only way to get this thing moving now is to get the parties who were successful at the polls to bring some of that momentum, simplify the problems and get solutions into place as quickly as possible.
Yeah, the DUP and Sinn Féin received a real shock in the elections last week. I think Arlene Foster has said a failure to restore power sharing will be a shame on all politicians. There's a real drive this time around in these talks to get something done, but it relies on compromise. And where do you think that's going to come from?
I think they're all going to have to compromise. I think Sinn Féin needs to compromise on the Irish Language Act. It hasn't even produced draft legislation to outline what that bill would even look like. So the idea of hanging about and waiting until all of that is done, that's a nonsense. I think focusing on health, particularly since the RCN called it a nurses' strike in Northern Ireland for the first time in its over a 100-year history. The RCN would simply not do that if it didn't feel that there was urgent issues to be dealt with. And remember, the health department has been without a minister for 3 years. It means the permanent secretary has been able to, all the permanent secretary could do is to juggle money. So I think the urgency is around health. And I think that should take away most of the blocking ploys that Sinn Féin in particular have been using over the last 3 years.
Yeah, the Royal College of Nursing and other health workers all going on strike on Wednesday to protest at pay restraints and staffing shortages and many other problems in health and social care. What do you think the effect of not having a working government in Northern Ireland has been over the last 2-3 years?
Well, I think it began in the minds of the electorate as something purely theoretical. But we've seen, I think that the most visible aspect of it is the health issue, but we've seen infrastructure projects mothballed, taking much longer than they should have done. The business of government, for the most part, is a fairly mundane, kind of boring job that most politicians don't get much credit for just doing that job and keeping things moving. But I think in a way, when you take it away for 3 years and you see how the problems that kind of stack up, the GP, the GP service in Northern Ireland is all but non-existent. We have people going from the north to the south to pay €50 to go and see a GP in the Republic. Rather than try and get into a queue and see the GP locally. So all of these things are things that actually, for once, in a way, for a polity that's completely hooked on the whole question of a United Ireland border polls, all of these are distractions to ordinary people who voted in massive numbers basically to tell their politicians to get back to work.
And Mick, just finally, what do you think the consequences are of not restoring Stormont? I mean, there's a legal deadline now, the 13th of January, but should that be missed, what will the consequences be, do you think?
Well, on past form, not a lot. We've had these deadlines before; they're movable, but I really don't see the consequences. Aren't really. I mean, the Secretary of State will be indulgent up to a point. The people who will not indulge any further shilly-shallying will be the voters themselves. And no political party in Northern Ireland has the appetite to go for another election. But if that were to be triggered, I think you'd see the blame fairly and squarely put on those parties who were dragging their feet. And I think really the fear of that, I think, will ensure that if it doesn't come back on the date given by Julian Smith, I think it will be sometime shortly after that.
Mick Fealty, really good to talk to you. Mick Fealty from Slugger O'Toole, which is an online news portal, giving his thoughts on those talks today at Stormont. We'll keep you across those this afternoon here on Sky News. You're watching the Sarah-Jane Mee Show.